What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm not quite sure what we've done to deserve such good fortune, but this is a week where my most anticipated show of the year, Westworld, and my most anticipated movie of the year, Infinity War, are coming out within a couple days of each other. It is an extremely cool time to be a fan of this kind of genre entertainment. As you can tell, I'm a little bit excited about Westworld. I tried to hunt down a black hat like the man in black wears, but the people who make it, they are perfectly willing to sell you one, but it costs about $600, so went for like a $30 imitation version. But if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that with season 1 of Westworld, I started taking this channel more seriously and taking my reviews more seriously, because as most of you probably already know, Westworld season 1 was some of the smartest genre entertainment of the last decade. I love Westerns, I love science fiction. It perfectly stirred the two of those genres together, but most importantly, it did so with an adult sensibility. This show holds nothing back when it comes to sex and violence. And from what rumors I've been hearing about this upcoming season 2 and what we've seen so far from tonight's season 2 premiere, it looks like they're going to be stepping down on the gas pedal, at least when it comes to the gore and the violence. While season 1 might have been called The Maze, season 2 very ominously has been described as The Door. And if we were to try and make a very quick, easy interpretation of what that might signify, I imagine it's going to stand for the various hosts that step through a door and basically become a new life form. In my opinion, they already are a new life form. But who knows, it might have something to do with this new game that Old Man William, aka the Man in Black, has now found himself. But if anything, the ambitious storytelling of showrunners Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, it seems like they're aiming their sights even higher, and they're making a show whose goals and ambitions are nothing short of trying to understand what it means to actually be alive and what is reality actually composed of. If you've been following any of the incredibly clever cryptic viral marketing that HBO has been engaging in for this show, we know that the theme park of Westworld is only a very small tip of a very giant iceberg in terms of all the various theme parks that they have ongoing. And personally, I just can't wait to explore more of this fictional universe that these two brilliant writers are creating. One of the best things about the viral marketing was, and I totally fell for it, Jonathan Nolan said that they were going to basically release a summary of the entire plot so that people wouldn't be so preoccupied with fan theories and what is going to happen. And it was actually a brilliant bit of rickrolling, where after a very brief summary of Bernard on the beach, we saw Dolores and Clementine at the piano playing Never Gonna Give You Up, and it basically transitioned into the theme song of the show with a dog at the piano. So I'll never be able to hear that song again without thinking of that dog at the piano and how foolish I was to think that Jonathan Nolan was just going to release a summary of season 2 online. So while I already know I'm going to miss Anthony Hopkins terribly this season, there's clearly going to be a whole hell of a lot to enjoy, as well as some new characters. But what I'm most impressed with this season 2 premiere is that they're absolutely not concerned at all with maintaining the status quo. Oftentimes, whether it's a movie franchise or a TV franchise, if something enjoys a disproportionate level of success, the people behind said creation get a little cautious and they start to basically play it safe. This season 2 premiere basically has exploded everything that is familiar about Westworld season 1, making it one of the most unpredictable season premieres that I've ever seen. And what I love is that it employs a pretty intricate kind of multi-leveled framing device through the eyes of Bernard, because on one hand we see the story being introduced with Bernard and Dolores having a conversation, and we saw a bit of that in the teasers leading up to the release of the season with Dolores saying, "Why on earth would you ever be frightened of me?" And Bernard very clearly is afraid of what Dolores might become. But then we get a flashback to when Bernard finds himself waking up on a beach about 10 or 11 days after the massacre at the end of the previous season. Ashley Stubbs is there, as well as a new character named Carl Strand, and they're basically trying to pick Bernard's brain and find out what's happening. But within this framework, we have an additional flashback where Bernard is basically retracing his steps through what happened to him in the immediate aftermath of the massacre at the end of the previous season. And it takes a very high level of craftsmanship on the part of the writers to be able to maintain this very delicate structure without the audience ever feeling confused or anything less than gloriously entertained. But I feel like this show very cleverly handles this very intricate story construction. But as Bernard starts to try to piece together what's happened to him on the beach, I noticed myself having a very interesting emotional reaction to what was happening. In season 1, we saw a lot of hosts die, and we saw them get scooped up and then fixed up and reprogrammed and then re-released back into the park. But we see all these soldiers basically executing hosts, shooting them in the back of the head, and it almost reminded me of like Ray Fiennes and Schindler's List, I felt myself emotionally feeling terror and pity for the host, because even though we were already well aware of the fact that hosts are alive from the previous season, after having had a year and a half to digest the fact that these are now sentient beings, I have a completely different emotional response to seeing hosts placed in danger. And one of the first things the soldiers do is that they scalp one of the Native Americans and open up his head to retrieve his memories to see what happened. And we see that Dolores was absolutely on the rampage, blowing people away, including this one particular host. So obviously, whatever Dolores's goals might be, some hosts are not going to be allowed to come along for the ride. But as the episode shifts into the immediate aftermath of the massacre, it really finds a new gear, because there's this great shot from the trailer, which we've been seeing for like a year now, but it's absolutely glorious to behold, where we have Dolores and Teddy riding across the field. I don't know a thing about riding horses, but Evan Rachel Wood looks like she was born to do it, because she's riding along, blasting people with a rifle. I mean, she is as badass as any character in any Western that you've ever seen. And I love how, even though they know that Westworld is basically an illusion and it's a construct, they still rely upon Western attire and Western gear. Granted, those are the materials they have at their disposal, but I like how, even though it is blatantly a science fiction environment in which these characters and the various narratives unfold, the flavor of the Western is still alive and well. But once again, getting back to the story construction angle, even though we are kind of experiencing the story through Bernard's perspective, the writers aren't afraid to cut away from Bernard and show us events that Bernard's character is not actually witness to. We see Old Man William, aka the Man in Black, waking up and immediately getting into a gunfight, and you can tell he's absolutely thrilled. I mean, this is a guy who was exploring Westworld for 30 years and kept looking for a deeper meaning to the game, and now he's finally found it. Real stakes, real consequences, and it was an absolutely glorious moment where he opens up this trunk, finds the black hat, puts it on. We see his face just spatter with blood, and we see he's got his guns and his gear. Old Man William is ready to go. But easily my favorite character and storyline from season 1 was that of Maeve. I feel like in terms of what that character experienced, what she became, I was absolutely riveted by her entire journey. So I was thrilled to see just how much of this first episode concerns itself with her new sidekick, Lee, and eventually her reunion with Hector. I mean, their love affair in season 1 just was staggering. For a show that had a lot of hot and heavy, kind of steamy activity, their relationship was certainly the steamiest. But Maeve essentially recruits Lee to her cause in order to help find her daughter. And there's a great bit where she threatens him by saying she's going to basically rip off his favorite piece of anatomy and feeding it to him, although it won't be a very satisfying meal. And he just cringes in terror and says, "I wrote that line for you." Whether you're a fan of just violent genre entertainment or just really interesting, clever meta storytelling, this show just has so much to enjoy. Another interesting subplot that still has a lot of mystery to me and I still don't fully understand is that concerning Angela. Angela was a pretty minor character in season 1, but from what I understand, her role's gonna be beefed up for season 2. But we see her riding around with this bandana that basically has like thorns in it. It's making her bleed, and she has this small band of warriors with her wearing those horned masks, and they're hunting down some of the remaining humans from that party. And some of them they let go, some of them they just blow away outright. But Charlotte and Bernard very wisely decide to part ways with some of those humans, because Charlotte has inside information that will at least give her a fighting chance for escaping from the park. But what's great is seeing with the character of Charlotte, I didn't really know who Tessa Thompson was when Westworld season 1 came out. I think it was right around the time of Creed, and Creed was the first time I'd seen her in a movie. But in the year and a half since then, we've seen her become this massive movie star. I mean, I absolutely loved her as Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if Charlotte plays a much bigger role in this particular season. But she takes Bernard down into this secret bunker where we see one of the new creatures that's a brand new addition to this season. They're called drone hosts, and they're absolutely terrifying. They're basically a host, but without any of the flesh or accoutrement that makes them look human. And we see that they're basically stealing memories and or DNA from some hosts and shipping that information out. Charlotte's not about to go into that topic with Bernard at that time, but when Charlotte tries to find an escape plan, she learns that unless her package of information is successfully delivered, no rescue attempt will be made on her behalf. So she puts Bernard to work trying to find Peter Abernathy, because as you remember from season 1, Peter Abernathy was basically the vessel with which they were trying to smuggle out a lot of information. And we see that Bernard as a host his files or his system has become corrupted. He's having these uncontrollable shakes and all these problems. He jacks himself with a syringe that seems to temporarily relieve him of the issue, but it'll be interesting to see to what degree the corruption of Bernard's brain is like a health hazard, or perhaps he's in the process of evolving and changing and becoming something even greater than he already is. So we get a little bit more of the Man in Black when he encounters that little boy from season 1, but the boy speaking in a really eerie voice is kind of half Robert Ford, half his own. And as the Man in Black grabs water and some dried meat and basically stocks up on supplies, this little boy tells him that a new game is basically going to be presented just to William, and the game has been catered to his interests, his needs, and that whether William likes it or not, the game's going to come to him. And William very casually just blows the kid away because he knows he doesn't need Robert Ford for anything anymore. Ed Harris in some interviews has basically said that his character is much more of a protagonist this season than in the previous one. It'll be interesting to see how his game ties into the larger themes of the show, and also to what degree the memories of himself as a young man, as William, will also be tied in, because we've seen in the teasers there are a ton of flashbacks of William and Logan in this upcoming season. But the episode draws to a close with a really interesting cliffhanger. Back in the quote-unquote present of the story, basically 11 days after the massacre, Bernard, Ashley, and Carl are still trying to piece things together, and they see on this map that all the hosts have gathered in a certain area, and as they go to explore, they find something that's never happened before. They find a dead tiger, and this is the first time where a creature from one of their parks has managed to cross a border into another one. But even more alarming is this enormous sea that has materialized out of nowhere. They basically say that Ford could not have designed that without anybody picking up on it, so where the hell did it come from? Even more alarming, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of hosts who have just basically drowned and died in this new sea. Bernard seems to think that he's somewhat responsible for killing all of these hosts. I was totally bewildered by it, but very clearly something massively important has occurred between Bernard's adventures right after the massacre and where we find him now. But it looks as if these parks are perhaps evolving and changing beyond the power and control of their creators, which for me is very exciting. Whether you're dealing with the samurai or the Romans or the Wild West, those are great environments, but I love the idea where we might see a hybrid new sci-fi universe where all these worlds are colliding. There are just not that many opportunities in entertainment to see all these different genres kind of rubbing up against each other, and that shot in the teaser for the upcoming episodes of Maeve in full samurai garb looks totally badass. I could not be more fired up to see what the next 9 episodes might hold for us. And as I've said many times in the past on this channel, we are living in a golden age of science fiction on television, so just enjoy it. We can debate which of these sci-fi shows is the strongest. Personally, for my money, I think Westworld is the best science fiction show in a very, very long time. But it's just one of many cool shows right now to be enjoyed. In any case, I hope you enjoyed my recap, review, reactions, commentary. I don't really do traditional reviews. I don't even really know how to do traditional reviews. All I know how to do is drink a lot of coffee and rant and rave about the things that I love and enjoy. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter @Colbrax. Always happy to talk about anything and everything on that platform. Leave me a comment in the comments below if you feel so inclined. And I'll be back at y'all on Tuesday for some more reviews. Onwards and upwards.